Liz Davidson, welcome back to the Fiduciary U Podcast. You were episode or guest number 20, and it's so awesome to have you back on the show. We fortuitously ran into each other at the Viking Cove Institute summit they had a few weeks back in San Diego, and it was great to run into each other, and glad to be back on, have you back on the show and talk about some really cool stuff that both you and Financial Finesse are doing. So welcome.
Thank you. What guest number am I now? Or what episode number am I now? Oh.
Going to be in like the mid-40s.
Mid-40s, okay.
Going to be in mid-40s. I don't know if it's going to be
over my age. I'll take it.
46.
I like to be in the 20s better, but hey.
Well, me too. Me too. I can't go. We can't go backwards. But I'm excited about this one. You've got some really, really cool stuff going on. Obviously, Financial Finesse and a lot of great things that you guys have done out in the industry and around. One of my favorite. I don't remember every episode I did, but I remember talking about, like, in a lot of ways with your story. You were like the OG of financial wellness, like potentially even termed financial wellness in general. But, obviously Financial Finesse has continued to have tremendous success, and you guys are doing a lot of cool things, especially on the tech front, AI and whatnot. But let's first start talking about something new. You've got a new book coming out. I want to make sure I get the title right. Money Strong, Your Guide to a Life Free of Financial Worries. Talk a little bit about that initiative and what the book is about, and really what prompted you to embark upon that project. Having written a couple of books myself, that J.D. Carlson's probably going to joke me for mentioning that on the show. It's a labor of love, but one of the most rewarding things you can do. Talk a little bit about your book and why you did it.
Well, it's funny you say that, because it happens. So it was, my first book was 2016. So this was, 6 years after. And I think that 6 years made me forget what writing a book was like. Right. What happened was McGraw-Hill reached out to me with an offer that literally I could not refuse, which was, we want you to write a book on financial wellness for people that are facing financial stress, which is, the vast majority of Americans, and you have carte blanche to write whatever you want based on your experience, and we're going to give you a nice advance. So it was kind of like, okay, this is pretty much, kind of a no-brainer. I get to write, the book I've always wanted to write. And what we did was really looked at our, 24 years of experience financial coaching, with financial coaching for employees of all walks of life. We've worked with employees from some of the largest, Fortune 100 companies, all the way to sports leagues in association with professional athletes, all the way to companies, employees from companies that have 20 people, right? So really looked at all this data, all these stories, and identified what we felt was the most universal framework that we could come up with that transcended success stories across the full financial spectrum. And that's what we call the START framework. And the book is based on this framework, which is set yourself up for financial success. And that's all the behavioral finance to make sure that you're doing the things. You're setting up an environment that's supportive of your financial success. You're automating wherever possible. You're selecting a financial identity. You're removing triggers. All of the things that we know work when it comes to neuroscience and behavioral finance. Tackle your financial stress, whether you're in severe stress because you're dealing with a crisis, or whether your stress is simply, I'm worried about the economy and losing what I have. There are ways to manage that stress both emotionally and financially. We give you all those tips. Advance towards the life you want. We talked about this earlier. It may not be what you've been told you should have. It's what you really want, not it may not be that home, right? You may be someone that wants to move every 2 years, wants to travel, and doesn't want to be a homeowner. You may not want to have kids or get married on the time frame, or have a life partner on the time frame someone else has told you. So really understanding what's going to drive your happiness and sense of fulfillment. And then from there, planning for those goals by saving and investing appropriately. Role model good financial habits and behaviors, because the more that you are able to role model, the more you're reinforcing your learning and continuing to keep yourself motivated. So it's a way to pay it forward, but also continue to improve your own financial journey. And then thrive by living your purpose, because we all know, we're all starting to realize that money is not about acquisition of things. It's not about status, and it's not about the Instagram lifestyle that most people can't afford anyway. It's about having the freedom to not be in relationships you want to be, in jobs you don't want to be, to not be chained to a paycheck, but instead to have the ability to find meaning and purpose and use your time and your talents in the best possible way to be as fulfilled as possible as a human being.
Love it. I love it. In a lot of ways, it sounds a lot like kind of the comprehensive planning process of, beginning kind of with the end in mind. This is what good looks like for me. Yeah. And now how do I work backwards to make that a reality? Is that fair?
That is fair. I think the difference is neuroscience, right? Brain science has taught us a lot about the behavioral aspects of money. And so really integrating that as a first step, I think is critically important, because you can have all the goals in the world and even really good plans. But if you don't have a system that keeps you from being derailed because of our human nature right. that gets in the way, it's very easy to get off track. It is so easy. For example, not having an emergency fund, or not having a supportive group of friends and peers that are supporting your journey, as opposed to dragging you out to, expensive dinners or clubs or vacations that are, very hard to resist, but aren't necessarily, supporting maybe what you want for your financial future.
Right. What was your kind of process in writing the book? Like, how do you write? I know kind of the process I follow, but what's your process when you having written 2 books now? Like, what does that look like?
Oh, God. Honestly, it's deeply dysfunctional, I think. I did say earlier that the 6-year time frame was probably very good, because I completely forgot the difficulties and only remembered the pride of having written a book. And so my process is to, obviously do an outline first. We developed the framework very early on, and the outline was very, very detailed. The next step was severe procrastination, which did actually serve a purpose, because as you know, you've written a couple of books, that thinking about it, right? You're running, or, the whole cliche in the shower, and you're thinking about it, and maybe jotting things down here and there, but you're not yet writing because your brain is germinating on it. And then to get to a point where I have to begin turning in the chapters per the deadline in my contract, or it could be at jeopardy, and then writing for 10, 12, 14 hours straight.
That advance is really good until you have to deliver.
To get that done. And, here's the thing. I have yet to meet a writer that I've talked to, you may be an exception, that isn't really motivated by deadlines, because it's very easy to be perfectionistic. You can sit in front of a blank screen and just write and rewrite if you have all the time in the world. But once you have to produce something, all of a sudden you hone in, you find the words, and if it's not perfect, you move on, and then you come back and edit. You don't sit at a blank screen when you've got, a few days before you have to turn this into an editor that you deeply respect. and is not going to react well to a late submission. So that's how I write. Not the most, perfect process, but it works.
Yeah. And I think that's the key, is finding like a lot of things in life, you got to find out kind of what works. And I've always, I'm not a writer. I would say I'm an author. And the difference between the two, in my opinion, is, a writer is like an artist with words, Hemingway. An author is more of an artist with ideas, and being able to kind of, nobody's ever going to confuse me of being an excellent writer, but an author with the ability to kind of take an idea and then break it down and communicate ideas really well. And then you've got editors who can come in and kind of work their magic and make the words sound the way that they should. I was the same way with you. I kind of worked backwards, and I had a very fluid, I had my framework, typically the way I did it. Because I get a lot of people ask me about, like, how did you do it? And I was like, well, I kind of envisioned, kind of like your start, right? Framework. I kind of envisioned, this is what I want the book to include. Like, these are the chapters, these are the topics. And then I would just kind of work backwards based on that. I've got my framework, I've got my outline. These are the 15 chapters or 20 chapters I want in there. And then I would just kind of I would be inspired. I'd write something. Sometimes I'd get stuck. I'd go focus on something else. But you're right with the deadlines. If you don't establish those, and that goes back to kind of the behavioral, the neuroscience, if you don't if you don't establish the behavioral aspect of whether it's finances, whether it's writing, whether it's, working out and getting healthy, if you don't have a system or a framework, I just think by nature, it's really, really hard to achieve the things that you want to do. So congratulations. I think that's awesome. When does the book come out?
It is out.
Awesome.
So it was.
I'll link to that in the show.
Yeah, it was slated for 2/28. It actually was born into the world, I think, last Wednesday evening, Thursday morning, depending on West Coast, East Coast. So supply chains and similar nature are, unpredictable. So all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute. It was supposed to be February 28th, but, I guess, between the printer and Amazon and iBooks and everything, it just kind of got out there into the world. And so baby came early.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure to link to that in the show notes. One of the cool things that you're doing, though, is that the charitable bent around this, and you're doing some things with, I think probably based on your experience, I think with like the NFL Players Association, you're doing things with the NIL, which is, I believe is it the name, image and likeness, I think is right. Yes. It's basically how college athletes now can essentially be paid. And you're doing some really cool stuff around that. Maybe talk briefly about what that looks like.
Yeah. So 50% of the proceeds of the book are being donated to a separate fund that we are using to fund a purely philanthropic initiative, which is a financial literacy certification program for student athletes so they can maximize earnings from the new NIL law, their name, image, and likeness law that went in effect July 1st, 2001. And what this allows them to do, which they should have been allowed to do, I know you mentioned you were a student athlete. Back in our day, they should have been allowed to do. But, they weren't, and now they are. And now they have all these different ways that they can earn money, but they lack education around just even the basics on taxes. Imagine getting a big check because you're a star player on a football, baseball, basketball, volleyball, whatever sport it may be. You have a lot of followers and a brand reaches out, wants you to do a national campaign. You get a really large check. Imagine 6-figure check. This is happening. And no one tells you have to pay taxes. And you're 18, 19-year-old college student. When you were an 18 or 19-year-old college student, would you have saved a decent portion of that check in a separate account to pay the IRS? Of course not, right? So we are sitting on this potential kind of powder keg of student athletes that are unfortunately, I think, going to end up in some serious tax trouble and potential debt from something that could be, if they have the right education, one of the most amazing wealth building opportunities of their lives. And that's a big issue. So, we're very focused on preventing that negative scenario, but also how do you make sure this is a positive scenario? Now take that same athlete that gets this national contract and has the education to know, okay, got to save some for taxes, but also I'm on scholarship, but that doesn't fund other basic needs. Let's make sure I take care of those. Let's establish an emergency savings fund. Got myself in a little credit card debt. Let's get me out of that. And then let's start investing for my future, because we all know investing $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, whatever amount of money it is from even that one contract, one 6-figure contract, what that's going to be in 5, 10, 20 years down the road. And that's one large NIL contract. Now, not everyone is making this amount of money. It's very new. There's a huge spectrum, but the opportunity is there. And if we can get these student athletes who have 50 million collective followers and 14 million college students, many of whom follow them, to model these financial habits and behaviors and show what you can do with money if you use it in a positive way. Imagine the ripple effect on this next generation that is facing significant financial headwinds. This could change everything. Yeah. And we're obviously, you can tell, we're very excited about it.
I think that's awesome. Like I said, I in the show notes we'll link out to the book, and super exciting. So talk a little bit about just like what's going on with Financial Finesse. You guys have a lot of cool initiatives you're working on. Maybe talk about it's funny, like I hear you talk about wellness, but it's more about coaching. Talk a little bit about kind of what's happening. How have you seen? It's been almost 2 years since you were back on the show. 18 months, let's say. Where have you, and obviously wellness and has become a kind of a hot commodity. What have you seen over the past couple of years? How have you seen these conversations change? And talk a little bit about, Financial Finesse and kind of the approach of coaching, versus advice or comprehensive planning and whatnot.
Yeah. So really, and it's maybe 24 months ago that we really made this shift, but certainly we were in the very early stages 18 months ago. And now I would say, we really are making a big impact in this area. We started, again, about 2 years ago, what we call our Powered By division, which provides infrastructure, both technology-wise, as well as our financial coaching services to retirement firms, benefits brokers, and general, financial services firms. And that has just exploded. It's the fastest growing area of our company. And what we're discovering in working with these firms is the synergies are way more than either we or our partners thought. And so these relationships are growing very aggressively and exponentially, to the point where many of them, say they're on the retirement side, are paying for financial coaching, both virtual as well as, human-based. It's weird that we say human now. It sounds so inhuman, but human-based coaching to all their participants, but as part of their larger financial wellness strategies, because you have to have a financial wellness platform now. It is a must-have in the retirement industry. If you're a record keeper, if you're a retirement plan advisor, increasing the RFPs are asking, what are you doing to improve outcomes? What do you have in terms of financial wellness? And having a solution that is best in class and combines financial coaching for those that are more financially stressed with financial advice and wealth management, which we don't do, but many of these firms do or do through advisors they're partnered with, for those that need help growing and preserving wealth, is really the highest level offering you can provide employers and an incredible differentiator. So we're just seeing this business is growing at a phenomenal rate. And I think we're still at the beginning, which is crazy because what has happened in 2 years would typically take, I think, a decade to materialize. But the timing, it was just right at the right time when the world was starting to realize the depth of financial stress in this country, and employers were starting to demand better mental, physical, and financial solutions. And then obviously if employers are demanding that, anyone servicing those employers, has a vested interest in being able to bring those solutions to the table.
Right. What, and this kind of powered by, how does that work?
We think of, I'm kind of aging myself here potentially, but Intel Inside, right? So that's the chip in the computer. Essentially, our clients are the computer. So they're the Apple, they're the brand that is providing this, and it is their program. We are leveraging our tech infrastructure, our coaches, our marketing infrastructure, to make sure that the participant engagement is there, that the plan sponsors and advisors, are all in this whole ecosystem are aware of it. So we are powering their program, but it is their program. And each one of these programs that we have with our partners is unique because they all have different offerings. They're all layering different, types of education and content in addition to what we bring to the table on top of it. So, they really are able to have a very differentiated offering. Even if you have two different firms working with us, we're behind the scenes elevating them and getting them to go to market in a very scalable, effective way. It's their program with our support.
Got it. What would you say are the keys? What do you would say are the keys to success for wellness for an employer and then for, let's call it, an advisor? Because you hear, I think there's definitely been this trend now where and we see this with a lot of things. It's kind of like companies are, it's kind of like, hey, I got to have this because my competitors have it, whatnot. But actually moving the needle and making it work, what does that look like? And what are the keys to success to have not just a wellness program, but one that actually gets the job done? Yeah.
So I'm going to say 3 things. Go all in. A lot of people look at this, check it off the box initially. The RFP says, we have to have it, so let's scramble and find something. Employers are sophisticated now in a way they weren't before, and that's not going to fly, certainly with the kind of employers that you really want as clients. That's not going to fly. You can't be half pregnant. You can't be half in financial wellness. You are in or you are out. And by going all in, have a strategy. If you're an advisor, you're a record keeper, you're in this industry in any way, have a strategy and a program built already. Do not wait to build, based on one client asking for something, because you're going to be behind the curve. You're not going to be able to present with the confidence of having the best practices, the results, the case studies, the references. And again, clients can see that. Second, mass personalization. And we talked about this earlier, right before the podcast. The days of one by one, right? Like in the break room, meeting with people. And that still happens. But the thought that is going to get you to the scale you need to affect major transformational change for your clients, your plan sponsors, that's just not a thing anymore, especially with so many people working at home. So our programs and really best practices are all based on what we call mass personalization through leveraging technology coupled with webcasts that can be delivered in large groups and one-on-one connections to coaches through chat, text, email, phone. You can reach a very large number of people, but in a very personalized way. So we have like a virtual financial coach called Amy that personalizes the experience through AI in a way that wasn't possible even 5 years ago, right? I mean, it's just that the world has advanced so much. You have to be thinking that way. Has to be mass, has to reach a large number of people, but has to be so individualized that you, Josh, have a completely different experience than me, Liz, because our lives are different. The way we learn, what we need are different. And then the last thing is it has to meet the needs of everyone, from the most financially stressed or lowest paid employee all the way to the executives that might be in wealth preservation mode, and everyone in between, and all the challenges and life events and goals they have. If it doesn't meet that, if you're not all in, if you don't have a mass personalization strategy, and if you're not able to reach the full spectrum of employees, I don't think you're really in the financial wellness game. And I don't think you really have an offering that is sustainable long term.
Kind of that boardroom to the break room, or the break room to the boardroom.
Yes. And employers expect that. They would expect all of their employees to be able to have unlimited access to a highly personalized experience, level benefit. The days of I just work with executives are over.
What do you see? It's interesting, just having worked with companies for a long time, and companies offer lots of benefits to employees, but a lot of times employees don't take advantage of like the full spectrum of benefits. And I'll never forget, I might have mentioned this on the podcast before, but I had a client years ago, big engineering firm, a couple of thousand people. And one of the things they did that they had done forever, and it was kind of like the new leadership had taken over and they continued it, was at Thanksgiving, they bought a turkey for every employee. And they were spending like $60,000 a year on turkeys. But the COO was like, I don't know if my employees value getting a turkey. If they don't, like, I don't want to spend $6,000. I can deploy that money in something else that they're going to value. So there is this, like, I think a lot of times this kind of disconnect of both what benefits do we need to offer, but then, like, are the people we have like taking advantage? Because if they don't know there's the benefit, or they don't understand how to use it, or they're not taking advantage of it, then we have a disconnect. And we're not getting a return on the investment in that benefit that we should be. What do you find, just generally speaking? Do most employees understand their full spectrum of benefits and taking advantage of it?
Absolutely not. Most large companies have between, 50 and 100, and some have more than 100 benefits. When you look at all the core, retirement, health, core benefits, to voluntary, to work life. I mean, it's, to specialized benefits like fertility benefits. I mean, there's so many turkeys. That's the first I've heard of that, but that's a legitimate employee benefit, right? So when you look at that, I mean, most employees can probably name 5, maybe 10 benefits their company has. And yet, when you look at how employees build wealth, it's maximizing their comp and maximizing their benefits. And most employees are leaving a huge amount of money on the table by not being aware of benefits, therefore not using them. In some cases, there are free benefits like tuition assistance that they may not even know exist, and they may be actually paying to go to school when they don't have to. I mean, these things happen all the time and can add up to tens of thousands of dollars a year per employee. In some cases over a lifetime, can be $1 million a year plus, if you think of not taking advantage of the retirement match or, picking the wrong healthcare plan, those kind of things. So a lot of what we do as a financial coaching provider is integrating the benefits into our entire ecosystem, our digital experience, our webcast, and our financial coaching delivered through financial coaches, because awareness is part of it, but then is this based on the challenges or goals you have? What are the right benefits to connect you to, and how do you maximize them? It's not enough to just know it's there. How do you use this benefit? What's the right amount of money to put into it? What are the right choices to make about it? Because there's so much complexity to all this stuff, and a lot of employers just keep adding. So you just keep adding. You're already kind of confusing people, and you have all these benefits on your intranet, and it's like, how do I even begin to make a choice? It's that, remember when our 401k lineups had hundreds of funds, and we thought that was good because we were giving people more options? Well, what happened? Inertia. People got paralyzed. It's like, I can't figure this out.
Right.
So my biggest advice to employers is actually think about doing the opposite and narrowing down, to your point, what do my employees really, really care about? But secondarily, make sure you are effectively communicating this. And the best way to do that is finding a personalized way, ideally working with a firm that can help your employees make these decisions about benefits so that they really realize the full value. It's not a benefit if I don't even know it exists.
Right. Yeah. There's no perceived value. And a lot of benefits is, for companies, it's about merchandising, right? It's I like that. You have to be able to figure out how to merchandise in a way that you get that alignment, that it's not just, because I think you get that a lot of times. And this is where I think advisors can kind of step in some ways, is, not just thinking about the retirement benefit. It's really, and I think this is probably part of what your pitch over the years was, is in some ways, wellness can be the benefit that makes all your other benefits work. Right?
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And in that process, gets employees to look at their employers in a totally different light. Because if I see my employer as a partner in my financial security, and retirement's obviously a big part of that, but there's health, there's wellness. Again, there's those benefits that might happen at different points in time connected to life events, my EAP that might be able to help me through a divorce, through legal counseling and support, my maternity benefits down to lactation stations available at work, all of that, right? Freezing my eggs, all of these things.
I personally would not be using that benefit. Leaving that on the
benefits are relevant to all people is another thing. But if I really see, wow, over the course of, the time I've worked with this employer, they have helped me achieve all these different goals and get through all these different life events. That is a completely different relationship than if I just feel like I'm collecting a paycheck and I have to go during open enrollment and make some decisions that I don't really know how to make, but there's a deadline, so I got to do it.
Right. Yeah, they're definitely. I mean, it's interesting. You see this. I used to see this with employees all the time. Is they go someplace, they take a new job to make $10,000 a year more, but they'd be leaving. Maybe they'd be leaving $20,000 a year in benefits because all they thought about was the cash compensation. They didn't understand how to compare like what I have. And that's like helping employers really to be an employer of choice is, and I think we talked about it, like every company is looking to hire great talent. Even if companies are downsizing or going through rifts, like I guarantee you, if they find an A player, they may have just, Google just laid off thousands of employees. Guarantee you, if they find what they feel like is an A player, that person's getting a job, right?
Yep.
Because it's really about kind of finding that talent. And, how do you make people more productive? And one of the things you talked about before we started chatting, and then even through it, is this idea of what I would consider financial stress is like acute in a lot of ways. Like if I break my arm, like I have like an acute issue. Like I got to go to the emergency room. And get whereas, and I don't really know what maybe so high financial stress is acute, where like maybe low financial well-being, the more emotional, is more like chronic. Like you may not have acute issues, but you may have more chronic issues.
I love where you're going with this. That's a wonderful analogy.
And so thinking about like it's you got to help people address the acute. When somebody has a broken arm, it's like I can't, I can't wait. Whereas
you're not going to be writing a book, kind of thing.
That's exactly.
You're not going to. Yes.
And how do you see the interplay of addressing, and maybe that's that mass personalized, like you're going to have your part of your population is going to be under kind of acute financial stress. You may be able to get them out of like the ICU, but now they need to go into rehab, and that rehab is more kind of long-term and more chronic. Like how do we save their life in ICU? And then how do we help them get back to a good semblance of living? How do you tackle those issues? Because they're two different problems, even though they're related.
No, and I love how you put that acute versus chronic, because you're absolutely right. Really quickly on the chronic, a lot of people that are under chronic stress, and I'm going to use an analogy for this in a minute, don't even realize it, chronic financial stress, because it is how they live their life. But it doesn't mean they're not stressed. And it doesn't mean that cortisol that is being released isn't damaging their body and having an effect on their mental or physical health. It's just this load they carry and they don't know anything different. I went in to my ENT late last fall and discovered I had chronic sinusitis and I was at risk for getting meningitis, and he scheduled an emergency sinus surgery, which is pretty unheard of. But I was just dealing with headaches, low energy, and just going, okay, this is getting old. Like this is literally what getting old is, and I'm going to just drink more coffee, and I had no idea how sick I was because it was my reality. And that's how many people are living financially. On the acute side, if there is a blessing to the acute, it is that when you are under severe financial stress and you're in a crisis or just struggling mightily to just keep your head above the water, you feel that and you know you need help. Those people will reach out and they're ready. And they're ready not only to fix their problem, but they're ready to never, ever be in this situation again. So those are a lot of our most transformed users. Are those people where they call, you help them resolve their situation. I mean, sometimes that's talking to their landlord. It's buying them a little more time. It's coming up with ways to tap into cash immediately. It might be, employers have these compassion funds. So it might be getting a grant from an employer or other social services, but it's helping them get to a place where they're stable, as you mentioned, then helping them build an emergency savings by looking at what they can do to either raise money, reduce expenses, etc., take a better advantage of benefits is a part of that. And then they want to start progressing towards their goals because all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, okay, I can breathe because I have this emergency savings. Like they feel different. I feel different right now talking to you because I had this sinus surgery. I'm like, this is how it's supposed to be.
Right.
I'm supposed to be able to take in air without needing to have effort every 15 minutes. Like, oh, this is amazing. It feels my whole body feels different. My whole energy level feels different. And that's what happens. And then they never, ever want to go back. So sometimes that acute is, in retrospect, one of the best things that can happen to you. It never feels that way during the time. With the chronic, that's a bit harder because, again, you don't know you have it. But that's where things like ongoing education, that's where the START framework and getting people to understand that they can have the life that when they really think about it, they want to have. It's just going to be, a process. And just because they're not suffering right now doesn't mean they can't get themselves and their families in a better position.
Or they might be suffering and they just don't know, right? That's the thing about chronic pain becomes kind of the new normal. So it becomes in some ways like imperceptible. Like you said, you're like, oh, it's just like how I'm supposed to feel. And it wasn't, until it's like, no, actually, like there's a reason you feel the way you feel. And it's not like we need to fix that.
Exactly. You don't need to live this way that you're so used to living. And I think you can get people. I mean, I'm very thankful I went to my ENT on time and I didn't end up with meningitis, right? And you can get people, I think, who might be at the precipice of a potential financial crisis to realize, wait a minute, this is not how I need to live. I can have a completely different future. But you have to make sure that you're bringing this to them and you're personalizing it around them so they're connecting it directly to how it can improve their life.
Well, and then that's ultimately, and I think most people's financial issues are not intellectual. They're behavioral.
Correct.
And, in life, it's funny, like really bad decisions typically are like easy not to make really bad decisions. Like you see something really, really bad. Usually, a great decision is easy to I think choose. A really, really bad decision for most people is easy to like avoid. Yes. But most of the decisions we make fall kind of within the spectrum, and it's all about trade-off management. And it's funny, one of the things you said, right? This life that you want to live, like for most people, I have a mentor for years. He said, you have to want what your wants lead to. Like, yes, if I want to lose 30 pounds, like that's a noble goal and that's good. But I can't just want to lose 30 pounds.
You want to be healthy.
I want to be healthy, and I have to want to do the things that enable me to do. Like I have to learn to love getting up at 5:30 in the morning and going to the gym, or saying no to that, piece of cake that I want. Or you have to want what your wants ultimately lead to.
You have to commit to the struggle, right? Accept and commit to the struggle that it's going to take. Because if you don't want the struggle, you're not going to get there.
You're not going to do it because you're going to have to be willing. And sometimes that means, and I like your framework and I'll be interested to read kind of the book, but I think systems reduce stress for people, right? People.
Yes.
I did a survey in 2019 when I had my firm. We surveyed almost 2,000 participants. Completed a 75-question questionnaire at an 89% completion rate, which is kind of
wow. But
what was interesting was that high levels of stress, as you would imagine, but only 24% of people had a written financial plan. And I surmise that was actually a key driver. Like we tried to do all this comprehensive planning for people. Like most people don't have super complex scenarios that need all of this. What they really need is like an actionable plan. Like, I really do believe that people feel out of control and stressed when they don't have systems and structures in place and frameworks, as you mentioned with your book, to kind of navigate and filter through the decisions I have to make and understanding the trade-offs. How important do you feel like systems and structures are to helping people not just want the right things, but do the things that lead to the outcomes they want?
I think and I think you make a very good point. And I saw this on LinkedIn yesterday. So, and I don't remember who it's sourced to. And, so grain of salt, but I think the larger point holds that we are bombarded with something like 10,000 possible decisions like in an hour of time. And that includes like what we decide to say or do or eat or not eat or whatever, right? But our brain can make like 22 or something crazy like that, right? And so we have tremendous decision fatigue because we have so many choices. We have some unlimited choices of what we could do with our time, with our money, et cetera. So having a framework that kind of takes away the noise and it's like, start here, go here, like step by step. I mean, it is such a good way to reduce that stress and the decision fatigue and just have a path to follow instead of trying to create your own path amidst all of this chaos. But I think it also does another thing, which is really, especially the way we articulate in the book, outlines what it's going to take. And you get to decide, do I want this struggle? And there's a book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F. Mark Mason.
Thank you for not saying that, because now
the FTC, right, or whatever, regulating your podcast. But Mark, I believe it's Mark Mason who wrote that, I think it's Mark Mason. It's such a powerful book. Whatever you think of the title, it's such a powerful book because it forces you to think of, do I want and accept this struggle to get to, or this trade-off to get to this goal? And that's a big part of this framework is we can give you all these tools. You decide which ones you're going to take, because some may fit seamlessly into your life and you actually enjoy them. Others you may be like, don't love it, but I can do it and tolerate it and make it a habit. And then there are other things that's like, you know what? I'm not going to create I'm not going to adopt any of these financial identities. I don't like any of them. And I just am not going to do that. Okay. You don't have to do it, but at least what you're going to do and what you're going to either take on because you actually think you'll enjoy it, or again, tolerate and eventually make a habit, that can be integrated into your life. And that's your choice, that's the beauty of it.
Yeah. And I think that systematic, that's the other thing you talk about decision fatigue and that kind of sensory overload. And, our brains are not wired for complexity. Our brains are wired for simplicity. Mm-hmm. And this, kind of like, there's with like paying off debt, right? There's a couple of different methods. One of them is like the debt snowball, which kind of counterintuitive. It's not the best financial approach, right? The idea is that I think you pay off your smallest debt first, regardless of
the interest rate. Yep.
Right? So mathematically you should pay off like, probably your
interest rate. Yeah. But behaviorally, it may work for you.
But behaviorally, it may work because you start to then build momentum. Like, and I've seen this in kind of my own life of like, I want to lose 30 pounds and I want to do that in, let's say, I want to do that in 4 months. Well, that seems like oh my gosh, how am I going to lose 30 pounds? But if you break it down and you're like, okay, I need to lose 2 pounds a week for,
20 weeks.
For 20 weeks.
Yeah.
I guess that's 5 months then, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But now that doesn't seem okay. Like, and I've got 7 days to kind of do that. So then now how does that inform, my decisions about what I'm going to eat or what I'm going to drink or how often I work out or how much sleep I get? It's just when you can break it down, and now that starts to kind of build momentum. Like, it's hard to get started, but that snowballs, the flywheel starts to go and it starts to get bigger and gain momentum. Now that can like rewire in some ways the way, like, instead of like, oh, this is a grind, this is really tough, to like, oh, I'm motivated by this now because I'm starting to see the progress. I think that's critical behaviorally. That's like when you tell people like, oh, you got to save $1 million. Like, that sounds really, really hard. But actually, if you give it enough time and you work backwards, it's actually achievable to do if you break it down into smaller things and you give it enough time.
And you just did something super important there that I don't know if you realize you did. You started off with 4 months, right? And you said, I want to lose 30 pounds in 4 months. Then you did the math because 2 pounds a week felt reasonable. And it turns out that's 5 months, right? That's 20 weeks. And that is the process people need to go through. Maybe you could do it in 4 months and it would be actually a little closer to 3 pounds. But that extra pound might require a level of exercise or a level of deprivation and change in eating habits that isn't sustainable for you because you're not going to like it and you're going to revert back to old habits, right?
It would be detrimental doing it faster than slower.
Yes. Yes. I'm losing a pound a week. It's so painful to go that slow on some levels. But, I got my green juice and I'm making small modifications to how much I exercise into what I eat. And they're small, incremental, but I can do it. And I'm happy with the changes I'm making. I'm actually feeling better because I'm eating better. And I'm okay with the pound a week, because I'm not willing to do what it takes to get to 2.
Well, I think you said something, I think you said something really important is you could do it faster, but the amount of deprivation that you'd have to go through ultimately isn't sustainable. Like, what you're doing right now is much more sustainable. And it's about building, financial wellness to me is really about building sustainable, resilient habits.
Yes.
That I can implement. Like, people always ask, like, how do you build wealth? And, I'm like, you save money, invest it prudently over a really long period of time.
Yes.
It's got to be sustainable. And we live in this culture where it's like, I have this acute pain. I want to get everything fixed right now. But in a lot of cases, that actually may be counterintuitive and work against people, as opposed to like, it's more about how am I building these sustainable, resilient habits that allow me to just, I read a stat that like 99% of Warren Buffett's wealth has been built after age 50. Why?
Yep.
Because he's obviously had good returns, great returns, but he's done it over a really long period of time.
Compounding, right? Yes.
And our decisions, that's an interesting, you might put this in your book, I don't know, but like, there's actually a compounding effect to our decisions that we make today.
Yep.
And getting people to understand that. It's not just about today, tomorrow, next week. The decisions you're making today will have a compound effect over months, years, decades. And not only that, and I love one of the things in your book, you talked about the role models, is it actually can have this long-term systemic generational impact. If maybe I come from a family and I get NIL money and I'm an athlete and I don't have any good financial role models, well, now if I can start to understand and embody good habits, now my kids that aren't even born yet, maybe I start to instill within them and then their kids. And that's how you start to change, like,
that's how you change the world. It's a ripple effect. That's how something goes viral. I mean, it's maybe in a more old-fashioned framework, but yes. And one thing you said that I thought was so important on this compounding, another thing I saw on LinkedIn, probably spend too much of my time on LinkedIn, but if you look at stagnation, which is how far too many of us operate, because it's kind of steady state, right? It's kind of where humans live, absent proactively deciding not to live there. And you're just kind of doing the same thing every day. Well, 1 to the, 306, one to the 365th power is still 1, right? But if you are doing 1% better every day, right? Every day, just 1%. It sounds so small. It sounds like insignificant. You're 37 times better by the end of the year. Like just that 1.01 to the 365th power, right, is 37. So that's huge, right? On one hand, you're staying at 1. Another, you're getting to 37. It's a little math geeky kind of paradigm, but the bottom line is that's just 1% better a day. What if you were able to do 2% better? And that's what the power of these things adds up to. There is a multiplier effect, and you just get into this flywheel of positive momentum. And then, like you said, the ripple effect you can have on others. And if one person teaches 10 people, and those 10 people teach another 10 people, I mean, you know how this works. Like, it's not very long before you have a movement, and you literally change the course of a history of a generation, or maybe multiple generations. So,
yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Liz, it's been awesome having you on the show. I'm so glad we ran into each other a few weeks ago out in California, and really excited about the things that you're doing. Certainly with your business, but also to kind of give back and to teach and inspire others. So, real quick, where can people go to stay connected with you?
You can go to L Davidson at financialfinesse.com, personal email or business email address. Obviously, our website is financialfinesse.com, and there you will find more information about NIL. If that's something you want to bring your alma mater, our certification program for student athletes, find out more about the book, which is also available at this point anywhere books are sold.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Keep up the great work, and always love chatting with you.
Thank you for having me. It turns out 40s are better than 20s.
That's right.